Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining Julia and I for another of our wonderful interviews. Now, you may remember about, 8 months ago, something
about
like that Julia and I were up in Scotland at Crieff, a wonderful place at the hotel there. We were at a health summit with the legendary Barbara O'Neill, and we had an opportunity, I had the opportunity to have a one-to-one on the podcast with Barbara. Now, we have been enjoying another health summit, but this time in Cheshire.
Yes.
It's been fantastic, hasn't it, Julia?
Absolutely stunning. Wonderful.
And Barbara O'Neill has agreed, I don't know why, but she has, to have another chat with us. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's lovely to see you. Now, last time I wanted to ask you some questions that perhaps were not normal questions, the health questions, and I asked you about your life and what it was like travelling and that sort of stuff. But Julia and I have sort of had a thought, haven't we, about your daredevil type of life, the life that people perhaps would not associate Barbara O'Neill with, because you're a very calm, very quiet lady, and yet we know that you go at breakneck speeds across the country in your car, you do wild things, jumping out of aeroplanes. So we thought we might ask a few questions on that, if you're open to that.
As a little lovely birdie told us something about it.
I'm open.
Brilliant. So, as I say, most people see you giving your lectures, there you are, pen in hand, and they probably wouldn't think that you are a fast driver.
Probably not.
And are you?
I am.
Within the speed limits, of course.
Well, yes, of course. Well, what Michael and I used to do was his brain rave. The kids had come up, between Christmas, New Year, when we were at the old Misty Mountain. So Michael had this bright idea to have car races.
Wow.
So what he'd do is he'd go into town and he'd talk to the people that own the car yards and he'd buy cheap trade-ins, little old trade-ins. You might get them for $150, something like that. And so he had quite a gathering of those. And then all the kids had come up with all their friends. And this was probably about 12 years ago. So our kids were in their late teens, 20s then. And then he'd have an auction. And all the kids would be there and he'd auction off the cars. And then I remember one day there was this big Monaro, big Monaro. I guess you know what a Monaro is. It's a big car.
No idea.
Neither of us know what that is.
Oh, it's big.
Big car.
Sort of a leery American car,
Sort
I
of like
think.
a speeding car?
Yeah, it's just probably...
Sports car?
Muscle car.
Six-cylinder. You're probably impressed that I know what that means. Maybe it was 8, something like that. Big.
Big beefy
And
car.
I'm sitting there with my daughters, my sisters, and Michael says, "And Barbara's just put in a bid." And I thought, oh, have I? Anyway, and then the others bid, and I just thought, we can play this game, and put my bid in, and I got this car. So what we did was my sisters and my daughters and I, we decided to paint the car a little bit, as everyone did. The guys put GT stripes on it, and we put Girls Are Rockin', and we called it the Love Machine.
Oh.
And on the bonnet we had love, joy, peace, and girls are ruling, all that sort of stuff on our Love Machine. And anyway, we had our races. It was the best of 10 laps. And Michael would stand there with the shotgun and boom, and then off we'd go. And it was this out in the back paddock, and we'd go round and round. And I was the driver because I could drive really fast. And I was used to driving out in the bush, so I knew how to handle the car.
Right.
Anyway, we didn't win any races, but, we had a lot of fun. But all the other guys, their cars were wrecked by the end of it, but mine was still pretty good because we're a bit more gentle with my car. Anyway, we put it in the shed and waited another year, and Michael came home with a can of pink paint. He said, for the Love Machine, and he oxyed off the top of the car so it became a convertible.
Oh, wow.
But you couldn't open the doors, otherwise the car would fall apart.
Yeah.
And so we painted it pink, and we got purple paint, and we painted like lace around where the wheels were. Love machine, girls are rocking, love, joy, peace, all this sort of thing over our car. And then we hit it. And then all the kids came up, and Michael had a few more cars, and we had the auction, and the boys would jack up the car and saw off the exhaust, so it was really loud.
Right.
And they were getting all their cars ready, and they were going around the paddock testing their cars out. And I said to my daughters, the time has come for the love machine to appear. And we had big hats and scarves and pink dresses and all of that. To get in the car, we had to go on the boot, and because you couldn't open the doors.
Right.
Anyway, we were in our cars, and we had to drive through a creek up to the other side, and then there was the paddock where the car races were. But to get through the creek, you had to really flatten it, because otherwise you get bogged. So the other side of the creek, you just flatten it, come through, and then we came out into the paddock doing wheelies, skids, backwards and forwards with our pink love machine tearing around the paddock. And all the boys were looking at our pink convertible. And then we'd line up for the races, and the boys always won. So we said to the boys, can we have half a lap start? Us girls, we can't drive as well as you boys. They said, all right. So we got half a lap start, and I flattened it. We were going, the girls are hanging on for dear life, and we're going round all the corners. We won the race, best of 10 laps.
Oh,
marvellous.
amazing.
But they never let us have a half a
No, I bet they didn't.
Only
half a
works
lap-
the once.
half a lap start, because it's quite an art to manage a car in a wet paddock.
Right.
Most people don't realise when you start to slide, you don't brake and you don't flatten it. You let the accelerator off a bit. I had a lot of experience driving in the mountains. So that was a lot of fun. And I remember one year we fed 43 a meal. And this is way out in the bush. This is at the old Misty that we had no electricity, way out 2 hours from the nearest town. But they'd all come because they loved the car races.
Wow.
On that, some of them said they haven't had so much fun, and anyway, the car races were good. So that's where I got a little bit of a reputation of being a racing car driver.
Brilliant. That's a unique feature of in Australia. I mean, unless you're on a what would they call it over here? Stock car racing.
Yeah, a racetrack.
A little circuit
sort of.
here. But that sounds really fun. And presumably there's mud. There's
It's mud everywhere.
dirt and
It was so funny. We'd line up, and the boys would come in close and just scrape the side of our car with their car. And we knew the ones that had done it because they had pink paint on their cars.
of course, yeah.
But we all maintained being ladies, and these boys that were being a little bit rough. And then the boys sometimes would back their cars up near ours and then make their wheels go
Spray-
really
yeah,
fast.
yeah.
And
Gosh.
mud everywhere, but we had a lot of fun.
Now, cars are one thing because they're on the ground, but I've heard that you have done a little bit of skydiving.
Yes. Now, I love flying because when I was 16, my father learnt to fly, and it's out in the country, so we kids would take turns going up and down, he'd land and up again, land and up again. My husband says they would never allow that today
No, I
because
bet.
of all the safety. But so I love flying, and then when I was 49 and my daughter Julia was 19, she came to me and she said, Mum, would you do a skydive with me for my birthday? I said, sure.
Just like that.
Yeah. So we had to go up in this plane that looks like it had all the insides ripped out of it to fit more people in. And what happens is you're connected to someone else by the shoulders. So they're behind you because, you're not an expert. So when you jump with another person, like this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're all jumping out of the plane. You have to get on the wing and jump. And I could see them looking at each other, smiling and nodding and winking, and I thought they're going to do something different with me. because all the rest were really young. Anyway, we got on the plane, on the wing, and it was like this, and the guy just fell back. All the rest, they jumped. We just fell back.
Fell back.
And I don't know, it's about 6 minutes, you're free fall. And he kept saying, "You all right? Are you all right?" Because, you're right up in the air, 12,000 feet. He wasn't used to having a woman that didn't scream. Because I just thought, I've got to value every moment. I'm not going to waste time screaming. And I was just watching. And then he pulls the chutes and then you go, which was just amazing. And then he'd pull there's a parachute like that, then he'd pull the strings, and you'd spin. And that was a lot of fun. And he
Wow.
was, again, used to a woman that didn't scream. I was just enjoying it.
And you, at no point were you frightened or scared or apprehensive?
No, I just thought, this is great. When you jump out of a plane, what do you expect?
Well,
this is
it's
what's
true,
happening.
but some people might get that. Yeah, they love the idea, but once they get there, the reality puts them off.
So, but something happened. So I had to hold my legs up like this, and he had big boots on, and his boots would land. So I'm dutifully holding my legs up, and the ground's coming closer and closer, and wind blew us and tipped us a bit. And in the tipping, my reaction was my foot came out. My foot landed first. And I heard pop and a lot of pain. And I'm rolling around on the ground, biting my finger. And the guy's going, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, ambulance." So the ambulance came, and so funny, the paramedic jumped out of the ambulance with an injection, and I said, "No, I want to feel my pain. I want to know what I can and can't do with that leg." They'd never heard anything like that. And I remember the paramedic was looking, he had this injection ready, and the guy that jumped with me said, "Oh, I'll have a dose." Anyway, they took me to hospital, and I remember being there, and the doctor had a look, and I could put my foot up and down, I could wiggle it, I could wiggle my toes. I looked at him and I said, "Nothing's broken, I'll be fine." He said, "You should have an X-ray," and I said, No, I'm flying to America tomorrow. I've got to go. So my son Peter, built like this, he just picked me up and took me out and went to bed with a poultice on it, and then got crutches and went to the airport. I was on crutches for 7 weeks, which is a bit of a pain. What I'd done, and I worked out later, because a friend of mine, because I ended up coming back to Australia 3 weeks later, but I'm still on crutches. So I had an X-ray there, because in America it's just too expensive to have X-rays or anything like that. And but I kept poulticing it and hot and colds and lying on my back and doing cycles in the air, all that sort of stuff to keep everything moving. And I had an X-ray when I came back, and they could not see anything. And the doctor said, "You should be walking." And then he pushed the bottom of my foot with all his might. Didn't hurt, but when I stood up and put weight on it, I couldn't. He said, "You should be walking." I thought, "Oh yeah, that's nice to know," and crutched out of there.
Gosh.
And then a friend visited, and she's a vet. She said, "We're smarter than doctors because we have to think for dumb animals."
It's true, though.
She said, "I think that you cracked your talus bone, and your tibia and your fibula sit on the talus bone. So they have an X-ray, and all they see is the side of the talus bone. And unless you see the side that's got the crack, you'll never know." She said, "You'll be on crutches for 10 weeks. So I did hot and colds massage, and 7 weeks I could start to take the weight. So yes, it was a very eventful jump out of a plane. It was so funny because when I jumped, I'm on the ground rolling around, in a lot of pain. And apparently Michael rang Jess, my daughter, and said, "Can I talk to Mum?" And she said, "Not at the moment." So Michael's hearing that. What's happened? Hasn't she jumped? Yeah, she's jumped, but there's just a little bit of an issue.
Yes, that must have
Anyway.
put fear in their minds, isn't it?
So, but anyway, Michael and I are both fairly blasé. We've been blasé parents. You know, she'll be right, mate. I guess that's the real Aussie way. But yes, he wasn't really happy about me jumping, but he's a very good husband to me. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yes.
Supportive is the only way, really, isn't it? So after that minor ordeal, or major ordeal, depending, with the bungee, it's not so much of a thing to be ziplining then.
No. And I visited my, I've got 2 daughters in Tasmania, so we were down there and they said, Mum, do you want to do some zip lines? And I said, love to. And this was about a year ago, I think. And, that was a lot of fun. And they told me later that they've never had a 70-year-old lady do the zip line, but that was a lot of fun.
Was it a long one?
They were little stretches, but I said next time I come back, let's do a really long one, because the long ones are,
Much more fun.
much more fun.
So just as a matter of interest, from a health perspective, you obviously get an adrenaline rush from doing this. Is that a good thing for the overall?
Well, it's a bit of an adrenaline rush,
Well, you're so blasé, of course. Nothing phases you.
but it's nice. And what is harder on the body is fear and stress.
Right.
But this is nice, zooming through the trees.
Children these days are not encouraged to climb trees, take risks, and all that sort of stuff. When I was a kid, we were climbing trees, falling out, or nearly falling, scraping yourself, falling off your bikes, all that. And parents are very frightened of their, treasured little things and think that they can't. Are you seeing more of that in society? And is that sort of cosseting of children a good thing, or is it actually not so?
It's actually very damaging to the children, and I'm very strong on this, and I see it so much. I say, let the children go, let them go. It's like this beautiful house we're in with the beautiful grounds. I just put my babies on the grass. I just put them on the grass and let them go. And so that's where it starts, because babies are very happy when you allow them to be independent. So my babies were always very happy babies. Obviously, if they're starting to get a little teary, I think it's, maybe sleep time, maybe feed time. And I think it's a good idea to encourage the children to be independent from a very young age. And you'll find a lot happier children, because it certainly strengthens their inner being to have the confidence that they can actually do something. And jumping on bikes, I think the balance bikes are fantastic. So I'm going to give you an illustration. I saw this one day. I was at a conference and I was outside in the break, and there was a park, and it was made up like roads, had stop signs, it was for kids.
Right. Nice.
And I saw this guy on a blanket with a little baby, and there was this little 3-year-old boy on a balance bike. Balance bike is just 2 wheels and a bike, and they run. And of course, from about 2, they can manage their balance bike. And this little boy had obviously had the balance bike for a long time, and he's just zooming round, going terribly fast. But his dad was watching him. So, the dad's going like every time he went past. And I often say that to parents. Sometimes we just got to watch. Just watch. And just do this every now and then. They just love it when you're watching them. Anyway, I quite enjoyed watching that, the man watching the little boy zooming around. And then I looked over and there was a lady, looked like a Chinese lady, and I find them incredibly fuss over the children. And she had a 2-wheeler bike with trainer wheels, and I find them a bit hopeless, useless myself. And the little girl on the bike had this big net dress on, that they often dress them in. And the lady's holding on to her little girl and, oh, careful, like this. And the little girl's sort of trying to do something. And then the lady's phone rang, and she looked at the phone. The bike fell over. The child hit their head, and oh, the mother's picking up. And I thought, what a difference. What a difference. And the girl on the bike would have been 5 or 6, whereas this little guy whizzing around as fast as he could go on the balance bike. I thought that is such an illustration of a lot of parenting today. They fuss, fuss, fuss. Do you know what that fuss, fuss, fuss basically says to the child? You're useless.
Oh, interesting, yes.
And the parent would say, oh, no, I'm just trying to help. I say, well, you're not. You're not. Let them go. Give them a little bit of space. Let them feel their way. Let them climb the tree. Let them do the jumps. And my daughter told me she went to a homeschool camp, and there was one area where it was men and boys only. Women were not allowed because they were jumping through hoops that were on fire. They were doing all these dangerous things.
Yeah.
I laughed when she told me because women are the safety, 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 and you can see they're the nurturers. They've got the little babies. But then there seems to be a spilling over of just going over the top. Let them go. Let them go. Let them feel their way.
You see a lot of parents, let me rephrase this. You see, people are worried about children with phones and things like that, but before the children get the phones, we see young mums with the pushchair, and they're here pushing the baby. And it would seem to me, from the baby's perspective, is you're not with me.
That's right. That's right.
That I'm
You're
being
not with me.
ignored.
That's absolutely right. And children will mimic rather than listen to what you say. So we really have to be an illustration of what we want our children to do. So if the parents are always on the phone, that's all the child is going to want to do. So I say maybe there's a time for that, but as little as possible. And I was at an education conference, and there was a very interesting woman speaking. She said they have proven through studies that children that see more green are smarter. And of course, what's the green is the trees and the grass.
Absolutely.
And
Well, I was going to say, Julia loves climbing trees.
Yeah, I just love being around trees, really,
Yes.
you know. I mean,
And so when you take little Joe with you, your 5-year-old,
yeah,
you're often climbing the trees.
yeah.
It's
a
great.
treasure.
And I say that to people, keep yourself fit so you can climb trees with your children, your grandchildren, just do things with them.
It's one of my fondest memories as well of watching my father climb a tree. Like, didn't know he could do that.
Yes, it's a lot of fun.
So going back to you being a bit of a daredevil, does that come back because you had a much freer lifestyle, and that so many people are frightened to express themselves and make a fool of themselves by doing not necessarily dangerous things, but climbing trees or even just falling about with their kids?
Yeah, yes, I think it's a very sad thing. We've almost gone the other way. You know how when you're going, people say, take care. Well, when my husband is saying goodbye, he says, don't take care. And he's writing a book, and it's called, I think he's going to title his book, life wasn't, we should be daring.
Right.
We should be daring things.
Take more
Nothing
risks.
ventured, nothing gained.
Ah, yeah.
And one thing that I love to do, which hardly anyone will join me in, is diving into freezing cold lakes and seas and ponds. And that took me a little while to get used to it, but I started in the summer. I'd do my morning walk, and I'd have all my winter woolies on so I get nice and warm, and I'd dive in, and then it got to winter, and I can feel the ice on the grass under my feet. And I remember I'd have this dialogue in my brain, what are you doing? You're mad. You're mad. And then I'd think, well, what's the hardest part? So I analysed what's the hardest part. You know, the hardest part is the thought. So I grew up in a home where we all learnt, like my sisters and my elder brother, my sister down from me, we all learnt Scottish dancing. And my brother learnt tap dancing, and I used to copy him. So, yes, I'll have to share it with you later, Richard. I do have a few tap dance moves.
Oh, we'll learn a lot.
Yeah, we'll get on that one.
And I even had some tap dance shoes at one point that I I painted silver for myself. So I think we're brought up in a home where we're encouraged to mountain climb. We're all avid readers. And I just tried to get onto my sister for her birthday, but I hear she was on safari in Africa.
Oh, nice.
And a few years before, she was in the Antarctica. So I guess we were all brought up like that, my family. There's my brother, me, and then I've got 3 younger sisters. But I think the sister next down from me, and probably me, we're the most... well, I don't know whether you'd call it daredevils, but when I'm in Ireland, stay with my friend Jenny, it's only 10 minutes drive to the sea. We run up and down the sandhills and then dive in the sea, and it's freezing, but we're hot from the run, and it's just so incredibly refreshing. And then when I was in Marylands with Jack last year, we found a big lake, and one morning it was white with ice. But I still went in, and it was really good because there was a little jetty, so it was a bit easy. It's a bit hard when on the edge it's sort of a bit slimy and too many reeds. I like to be able to get out and get dressed straight away. I like to get out and not have mud on my feet because I'm about to put all my nice warm clothes on. But what the hardest part was is it had steps and they were metal, and when I held on, the metal was frozen.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, you just go in, there's a little bit of and then a bit of a swim around and then out. And also the hardest part was this dog that this lady had was running in and around where I'm trying to get out, but got out, got dressed. And as you're walking along, it's almost like you've got an injection of power. It's just, it's almost addictive. So
Yes.
that is something that not many people join me in, is the diving in the cold. But I find that, because a lot of people say, how do you do what you do? Wherever I am, I'm looking for the cold creek to jump in, and sometimes it's a lake and sometimes it's a dam. But I was in Gilbert in Alabama, I don't know, a couple of months ago, I think it was, and we're in this cabin, huge cabin though, and it had a lake all around it. It was just beautiful.
Wow.
And I saw the lake and thought, right, I know where I'm going tomorrow morning.
Clocked
And then
that.
we're talking to the guy and he said, oh, by the way, there's an alligator in the lake. And Ricky and Jack said, Barbara? You see, if I'm eaten by the alligator, Jack has to do all the talking.
Yeah. That would be too much.
So I didn't get into
So
that lake.
to wrap up the conversation, did you want to ask a question?
I was going to say, I mean, with the cold water, I was pushed off a tall ship once when I was doing a tall ship sailing challenge. I'd been in the sun all day and was pushed in when I was just taking breaths to jump in. Once I hit that cold water, I was struggling to breathe, and I've always been a really good swimmer, so that really frightened the life out of me. Have you ever had that problem, of the cold closing your lungs down?
No, I guess I'm used to it. And, yeah, no, I never had that.
I suppose for me it was sheerly the being pushed in when I wasn't quite ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a fright.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas I'm ready for it. See, at Misty Mountain, we do the hot steam dive into the pool. I say to the guests, he who hesitates is lost. You just dive. And
Well, I was going to say, it seems that nothing phases you. You can...
well, I find that things like that is easier. Do you know what I do not like and I shrink from is violence
Right.
and loud, angry voices. There's something in me that just shrinks like
Yeah.
a shrinking violet there. I cannot handle that. And then a lot of people say, Barbara, you are so brave. And I don't think I'm very brave. I'm a tender soul. But I'm so outraged at what medicine is doing to a lot of people. You know, people come to me, they've been cut, they've been poisoned and cut and poisoned, and then basically spat out the end. And that makes me want to rise up and say, don't let anyone do this to you. You have a right.
Yes.
It's your God-given right that you choose what you do to your body. So there was a story this afternoon. The person's had 3 chemos. Can she stop now? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like the little treatment that you had a few hours ago and it was starting to hurt. And Richard said, you can stop. And you can at any stage you can stop. So I want to inspire and revive in people. It's your God-given right to say, actually, no, thank you. And something I've learnt so much from my husband, the power of being firm, but never getting angry, never losing it, but just speaking and saying, no, we're not doing it.
And funnily enough, sometimes some people find that very difficult when there's a figure of authority, a man in a white coat, for example, saying, you've got this, and if you don't take these drugs, this is what's going to happen. And to stand up to those people.
That's very, very hard. But you know what is also very hard, Richard, is when there's a few family members there.
Of course.
And they love you and they don't want you to die and they're believing what it says. But to say, Sis-Ma, thank you so much for your opinion. I'm going to seriously consider this. So that firmness really exudes confidence that I thank you for your opinion. I appreciate it because actually it's the best they know, even though it's ridiculous, it makes no sense, and you're not going to even consider it for a moment. You are appreciating that they've done the best they can.
Yeah.
It's like people coming in and screaming at the flight attendant because the plane's late. The poor flight attendant's got nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. But that confidence of, no, not actually saying no, because then they all rise up, say, thank you so much for your advice. I'm going to seriously consider this. Might be a bit confronting to say, thank you so much for your opinion, but that's actually what it is. It's their opinion. And where did that get that opinion from? Oh, it was in the books. Or it was at the conference they went to where they were lectured to by the pharmaceutical companies. So that, you know, and I think more doctors should be saying to the pharmaceutical reps, thank you for your opinion, your advice. And, you know, the amazing thing about 2020 is all these people, these politicians that were standing up, commenting on medical things, they're not doctors, they're politicians. They're newsreaders, you know, and they're telling us to social distance and wear a mask and...
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I trust the world looks at that now and realise, you know, we all should have said, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to give this a bit of thought because we've all got time to think.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been discussing being brave, being fearless, and different levels of fear. And I think what you've just ended on there of people taking back responsibility for their own bodies, for their own way of doing things is in this world, it appears to be a very brave thing to do, to be able to say no. But I think you're saying that people have got to bridge that gap and not be browbeaten into just doing what the family, what the doctors, what everybody else, unless they want to.
And not just that, you know, some of the there's so many alternatives out there as well now, you know, and people can get carried away with things and start believing.
Oh, yeah. And there's our gut feeling, you know, the gut feeling. I remember a lady sitting in front of me one day, she said, 4 years ago, I had breast cancer. I had the breast taken off. I had the chemo and the radiotherapy, and they said, you're totally healed 3 months later. She said, 1 year later, I got brain cancer. And they, of course, can't amputate the brain. They radiated chemo, told her, you're cured now. A year later, she now has liver and bone cancer.
Goodness.
And that's what I say, is she healed? Is she totally healed? And you know what she said to me, and I think it was the saddest thing. She would have been late 60s. She said, I never wanted to do it. She said, my gut feeling was I did not want to do that. So I think it's very sad, and I understand it's well-meaning friends. They've got total trust in a system that really is a broken system.
Yeah.
And if I can do anything, what I want to do is get people to think for themselves. Most doctors are ethical. I believe that, but who's training them? The pharmaceutical company is not ethical. Just a question, just to say, I hear what you're saying, and I need time to consider this, please, because that cancer didn't grow overnight. That tumour didn't develop overnight. You have got time. And we should never make a decision on fear, and most people do.
They do. You have a book called Sustain Me, which is available from the Good Food Project. We'll put the link in the description. Loads of great remedies, natural remedies, holistic remedies. You are coming back to the UK. You're everywhere, all over the place, very busy, we know. But you're coming back to Scotland later in the year, in September, at Crieff and then at Turnberry, Trump's Turnberry. But don't let that put you off. Those people who are, a bit sensitive, be brave.
It is nothing to do with him.
And then people can come along, they can book tickets and come and see you and actually hear more of your wonderful health advice, your common sense, which we've been enjoying here at Cranage.
Not to mention your charming charisma.
And we've had some jokes along the way, which has been
we've
good.
had some fun times.
We certainly have. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to Barbara for coming on the podcast a second time, and for Julia to join me.
Thank you for letting me sit in.
Until next time, I'll be back with more of my wonderful guests, but take care. No, shouldn't say that. Be risky.
Don't take care.
And we'll see you then. From us, bye-bye.